Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Hirat and these are the headlines. At least 13 policemen have been killed in a Taliban attack on their outpost in Afghanistan, Hirat province. Meanwhile, 3 policemen have been killed and 3 others wounded in 2 explosions in Kabul and Baghlan provinces. The Taliban have yet to comment on the government claim. The United States has imposed sanctions on 6 Hong Kong officials over mass arrests of pro-democracy activists in the city. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump has directed its administration to minimize procurement of Chinese goods and services. Trump's national security advisor Robert O'Brien said the move will reduce the risk from espionage. The European Union has sanctioned recently appointed Syrian Foreign Minister Faisal Mekdad. The Kurds has frozen assets of Mekdad and imposed travel ban. The move takes the number of sanctioned officials and allies of President Bashar al-Assad to 289. Germany's Christian Democrat Union will elect a new chairman today. The new CDU leader will be elected by 1,001 delegates in an online congress. The Christian conservative leader will succeed Angela Merkel as chancellor when she steps down after federal elections in September. In France, the toll from the coronavirus has surpassed 70,000, while the infections have surged to 2.93 million. COVID-19 fatalities in the U.S. are nearing 392,000, while over 23.5 million people have tested positive so far. Pakistan has registered over 2,400 cases and 45 fatalities overnight as the death toll tops 10,900. Globally, the virus has claimed over 2 million lives and infected over 93.7 million people so far. And in cricket, South African cricket team have arrived in Pakistan for the first time in 14 years. The team led by Quinton de Kock reached Karachi after clearing COVID-19 tests before boarding the flight. The Proteas will play 2 tests and 3 2020 internationals in Pakistan. Well, these were the headlines. News in detail coming after the short break. Stay with us. Welcome back, and now the news in detail. At least 13 policemen have been killed in a Taliban attack on their outpost in Afghanistan, Hirat province. Police said the attackers took the weapons of the local police force members with them following the attack. The Taliban have yet to comment on the government claim. Meanwhile, 3 policemen have been killed and 3 others wounded in 2 explosions in Kabul and Baghlan provinces. An explosion also occurred near an Afghan forces facility in the Kandahar province. The United States military has cut troop levels in Afghanistan and Iraq to 2,500 each. In a statement, Acting Secretary of Defense Christopher Miller says the move brings the U.S. closer to ending nearly 2 decades of war. He said 2,500 troops are enough to continue countering extremist groups in Afghanistan. Miller said the Pentagon is planning for additional troop reductions to 0 by May. Last February, the U.S. struck a deal with the Taliban to reduce American troop levels in phases. The U.S. has announced new curbs on Iran days after Secretary of State Mike Pompeo accused Tehran of having ties with al-Qaeda. The new sanctions target several entities and individuals related to conventional arms proliferation and shipping lines. Responding, Iran's Foreign Minister Javad Zarif said Pompeo's lies against Iran show an utter contempt for peace. The sanctions are part of President Donald Trump's maximum pressure strategy against Iran and come only days before he leaves office. In 2018, Trump quit an Iran nuclear deal that Tehran struck with world powers to rein in its nuclear program. But President-elect Joe Biden says he will return to the agreement if Iran adheres to strict compliance. The United States has imposed sanctions on 6 Hong Kong officials over mass arrests of pro-democracy activists in the city. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo called the Hong Kong crackdown appalling, saying the country will hold the responsible to account. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump has also directed the administration to minimize procurement of Chinese goods and services. Trump's national security advisor Robert O'Brien said the sanctions on procurement would reduce the risk of espionage. The new sanctions come ahead of Wednesday's inauguration of Joe Biden as U.S. president. The United States has told India that it is unlikely to get a waiver on its planned acquisition of Russian S-400 air defense systems. The warning significantly raises risk of similar sanctions on India as the U.S. imposed on Turkey for buying the same defense system from Russia. Diplomatic sources say the Trump administration has told India to scrap the $5 billion deal and avoid diplomatic crisis with Washington. It maintains that New Delhi did not have a wide waiver from a 2017 U.S. law aimed at deterring countries from buying Russian military hardware. Experts say the position of the U.S. is unlikely to change in near future as Biden has promised a tougher approach towards Russia. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan says no country can determine the steps Ankara will take towards its defense industry. He hoped positive steps will be taken on Turkey's role in the F-35 jet program once U.S. President-elect Joe Biden takes office. Talking to the media in Istanbul, Erdogan said despite having paid a serious fee on the F-35, the jets have not been given to Ankara. Last month, the U.S. imposed sanctions on Turkey's defense industry over its acquisition of S-400 systems from Russia. Washington also removed fellow NATO member Turkey from the F-35 program over the move. The U.S. says the S-400s pose a threat to its F-35 fighter jets and to NATO's defense systems. But Turkey rejects this, saying S-400s will not be integrated into NATO and purchasing them was a necessity. The European Union has sanctioned Syria's top diplomat Faisal Mekdad. In a statement, the European Council said it added Mekdad to the list in light of his recent appointment as Minister of Foreign Affairs. It said the relevant legal acts, including the names of the person concerned, have been published in the EU's official journal. The Council said it keeps developments in the Syrian conflict under constant review. It said the bloc remains committed to finding a lasting and credible political solution to the conflict on the basis of UN Security Council resolutions. The move takes the number of sanctioned officials and allies of President Bashar al-Assad to 289. The U.S. Defense Department has announced to include Israel in the area covered by its Middle East-focused Central Command. It said Abraham Accords have provided strategic opportunity for the U.S. to align key partners against shared threats in Middle East. In a statement, the department said the move will open up additional opportunities for Tel Aviv's cooperation with CENTCOM partners. It said Washington structured boundaries to best mitigate the risk and protect U.S. interests and partners. The department said the strong cooperation between Israel and Washington's European allies under Euro Command will also be maintained. U.S. President Donald Trump has received Morocco's highest award for his work in advancing the country's normalization deal with Israel. White House senior advisor Jared Kushner and Middle East envoy Avi Berkowitz received other awards for their work on the deal. The award was given to Trump by Morocco's ambassador to the United States, Princess Lala Youmala Aloui, in a private ceremony. It was a gift from Morocco's King Mohammed, and it was awarded only to the heads of state. Washington in the last 5 months helped broker deals between Israel, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Sudan, and Morocco. The agreements are aimed at normalizing relations and opening economic ties. In the United States, officials are implementing unprecedented security measures ahead of President-elect Joe Biden's inauguration. This comes amid warnings of possible armed demonstration by President Donald Trump's supporters. The ceremony will be the most secured after President Abraham Lincoln's swearing in. Officials have announced deployment of around 25,000 troops to secure the event. FBI, Homeland Security, and other security departments have also stepped up their presence. President Trump has already approved an emergency declaration for Washington to last through January 24th. Bridges leading into the city, along with all vehicular traffic, will remain suspended from today. The inauguration festivities will be broadly downsized as the country still struggles to contain the deadly pandemic. Now moving on to France, the toll from the coronavirus has surpassed 70,000, while the infections have surged to 2.93 million. Globally, the virus has claimed over 2 million lives and infected over 93.7 million people so far. More on coronavirus pandemic in this report.
The world has hit the grim milestone of 2 million COVID-19 deaths, with the US, Brazil, India, Mexico, and the UK contributing almost 50% of the fatalities. Brazil's Amazon region is racing to save dozens of premature babies after the latest spike caused catastrophic breakdown in oxygen supply to hospitals. Brazil's president said a plane will be sent to India to pick up COVID-19 vaccines in 2 or 3 days at the most. The U.S. death tally is nearing 392,000, while over 23.5 million people have tested positive so far. Meanwhile, inoculation drive in the U.S. continues, hitting snags as vaccine shortages prompted large healthcare systems to cancel hundreds of vaccination appointments. Several U.S. states have accused federal government of deception for pledging to distribute millions of vaccine from a stockpile that officials say does not even exist.
The Trump administration said they were going to expedite the second dosage, if you remember. And rather than holding back the second dose supply, they would send the second dose, and that would increase a state's supply. It turns out that that was not true. They had already sent out everything they had. So there was no increase in supply.
Meanwhile, Iceland has genetically sequenced all its positive COVID-19 cases since the coronavirus pandemic began, as World Health Organization has called increase in efforts to study viruses sequencing and worldwide acceleration in vaccine rollouts. The UK has tightened its border controls to block new variants of COVID-19, suspending all travel corridor arrangements.
We must take additional steps now to stop those strains from entering the country. So yesterday, we announced that we're banning flights from South America and Portugal, and to protect us against the risk of as yet unidentified new strains, we will also temporarily close all travel corridors from 0400 hours on Monday.
Australia's opposition has accused government of abandoning 40,000 Australians stranded overseas after Emirates airline abruptly suspended flights. While South Korea has extended its current social distancing rules for 2 more weeks, 2 of the largest bases of U.S. forces in Korea have also imposed a shelter-in-place order after the cluster of infections. Meanwhile, India's inoculation drive is set to begin today to vaccinate over 30 million of its frontline workers.
Now moving on to Pakistan, 45 people have lost their lives to COVID-19 over the past 24 hours. This takes the country's death toll to over 10,908. Health officials reported 2,432 new infections overnight. Meanwhile, more than 33,000 active COVID-19 cases have been detected in the country. The health ministry says out of 516,000 countrywide cases, more than 472,000 people have recovered. The ministry said over 233,000 cases have been detected in the Sindh province, while Punjab has reported nearly 148,000 cases so far. More news stories coming up after the short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Hamas has welcomed Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas' announcement to hold the legislative and presidential elections in Palestine. In a statement, Hamas said it affirms its extreme keenness to make this entitlement a success in the interest of the Palestinian people. It said the Palestinian people have the absolute right to choose their leadership and representatives. Earlier, Abbas issued a presidential decree to hold the legislative elections on May 22nd and the presidential elections on July 31st, 2021. The decree calls for launching an election process in all cities of the homeland, referring to the West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem. Palestinians' last parliamentary ballot in 2006 resulted in a surprise win by Hamas. Germany's Christian Democrat Union will elect a new chairman today. A close race is expected as Europe's biggest economy chooses its future leadership. The new CDU leader will be elected by 1,001 delegates in an online congress. The Christian conservative leader will succeed Angela Merkel as chancellor when she steps down after federal elections in September. The leader is usually the chancellor candidate for CDU's union with its Bavarian sister body, the Christian Social Union. Centrist Armin Laschet, our conservative Friedrich Merz, and foreign policy expert Norbert Röttgen are in the race for the CDU leadership. Merkel pledged not to run again after becoming Europe's predominant leader since taking office in 2005. The U.S. has imposed sanctions on Cuba's Interior Ministry, accusing it of serious human rights abuses. Washington also blacklisted Cuban Interior Minister Lazaro Alberto Alvarez. In a statement, Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin said the U.S. will continue to address the dire human rights situation in Cuba. Reversing previous policies, Donald Trump has tightened restrictions on U.S. travel and remittances to Cuba. Additionally, his administration has imposed sanctions on shipments of Venezuelan oil to the Caribbean island. But during his election campaign, President-elect Joe Biden vowed to reverse Trump policies on Cuba. The UN says the number of people fleeing violence in the Central African Republic has reached 60,000. This comes amid clashes between the government and the rebel groups seeking to overthrow President Faustin Archange Touadéra. In a briefing, a UNHCR spokesman said some 10,000 people have fled to neighboring DR Congo in a single day. Last when Russia and Rwanda mobilized forces to shore up Touadéra's government. But since the December election, the rebel groups have staged attacks that have claimed the lives of several people. On Wednesday, government forces repelled an attack by the rebels seeking to capture the capital, Bangui. In Chile, hundreds of anti-government protesters hit the streets of the capital, Santiago, calling for an end to inequality. Police in riot gear used water cannons and tear gas to disperse the demonstrators. The demonstrators called for reforms to existing pension, health care, and education systems. The South American country has seen protests against stark inequality for over a year now. Chileans voted in favor of a new charter to replace the country's Pinochet-era constitution in last October. Raging wildfires have forced thousands of people to evacuate their homes in Chile's Valparaiso region. According to authorities, the wildfires were started deliberately. Officials said at least 10 properties were engulfed by fire sweeping through the forest area near Quilpio city, but no deaths or injuries were reported. The fires blazed to 400 hectares of forest. Authorities ordered evacuation of around 25,000 residents, deploying hundreds of firefighters. The Interior Minister, Rodrigo Delgado, urged the residents to evacuate.
I know that for people, their property is of extreme importance. I know that for people, it is very difficult to abandon your belongings and your property. But the call from the government is that the lives of people come first.
The death toll from earthquake in Indonesia's Sulawesi Island has risen to 45 as a powerful 5.0 magnitude aftershock also hit the region. The local disaster mitigation agency said over 820 people have been injured and about 15,000 have evacuated. It said the search for victims who may still be trapped under rubble is ongoing. The agency has warned of another quake that can reach the magnitude of 7 urging the residents to keep out of the waters. The U.S. Geological Survey said the quake's epicenter was in West Sulawesi province at a depth of 18 kilometers. Yesterday's tremor leveled a hospital and damaged severely other buildings. WhatsApp has delayed the implementation of its new privacy policy by 3 months. This comes after millions of its users started moving to rival platforms like Telegram and Signal. The Facebook-owned company said no one will have their account suspended or deleted on February 8. The company said it will do more to clear up the misinformation around how privacy and security works on WhatsApp. It has clarified that the update does not affect personal data sharing with Facebook and only addresses business chat. The delayed policy change was originally scheduled to come into effect on February 8. Magicians from around the globe will celebrate the centenary of sawing people in half on January 17. Illusionists will get together online to revel the success of the landmark technique. Details in the following report.
100 years ago, illusionist P.T. Selbit created a magical classic when he put a woman in a box on the stage of London's Finsbury Park Empire and sawed right through the wood. Since then, the groundbreaking trick has never stopped amusing the audience. This year, the magician community is celebrating the longevity of the technique.
I want to show you this. That is a model of P.T. Selbit's sawing a lady in half, made out of toothpicks. And it is absolutely a perfect replica of the Selbit sawing.
Down the years, magicians have developed refinements with the two halves pulled apart. Celebrity magician David Copperfield came up with his version called the Death Saw, where he was the one tied down to a platform as a giant rotary blade sliced him in two. In an interview, Copperfield says sometimes he got injured during the trick.
Totally. I got cut a few times by the blade because the blade was a little bit off. You know, stages are different. Every theater you have different stages. So sometimes the box didn't go back together because the stage floor wasn't even and it wouldn't go back together. And so I kind of come out a little disconnected. But the saw actually is pretty dangerous. I mean, it's a real saw. And if it's off just by an inch, it's going to get me.
The London-based Magic Circle organization will host the celebrations with a live-streamed event on Facebook this Sunday. Guests will include Debbie McKee, the wife of the late British TV magician Paul Daniels. She will describe the many times she survived the procedure.
Now moving on to the business stories, India's trade deficit in goods widened to over $15 billion in December as imports rose to over $42 billion. According to the government data, the deficit resulted from a surge in gold imports while merchandise exports were up marginally. The merchandise trade deficit was over $12 billion in December last year. Meanwhile, the merchandise exports rose 0.14% in December from a year earlier to over $27 billion. Iraq has reaffirmed its commitment to the decision of Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries to reduce output. In a statement, Iraq's oil minister said Baghdad will not negotiate with OPEC Plus members for its oil production share. At the height of the last year's coronavirus outbreak, OPEC Plus decided to cut output by a record 9.7 million barrels per day. Meanwhile, more recently, Saudi Arabia has announced to unilaterally cut 1 million barrels a day of crude production. Now moving on to cricket, South African cricket team have arrived in Pakistan for the first time in 14 years. The Proteas will play 2 tests and 3 2020 internationals in Pakistan. The team led by Quinton de Kock reached Karachi after clearing COVID-19 tests before boarding the flight. The 27-member squad will also be tested for COVID-19 in Pakistan ahead of the series. The players will stay in individual isolation until the results of the first round of testing are released. The first test is scheduled to start from January 26 at National Stadium in Karachi. Meanwhile, Cricket South Africa will name its 2020 squad later, with specialists due to arrive in Pakistan on February 3rd. Moving on to Brisbane, where play has been abandoned due to rain on second day of fourth test between India and Australia at the Gabba. The visitors were 62 for 2 at tea, trailing the hosts by 307 runs. India lost opener Shubman Gill early in the innings to Pat Cummins. Rohit Sharma scored 44 runs before being taken by Nathan Lyon. Cheteshwar Pujara and skipper Ajinkya were at the crease before rain stopped the play. Earlier, the Kangaroos posted 369 runs on the board before being bowled out in their first innings. The four-match test series is labelled 1-1. Frenchman Stéphane has won the Dakar Rally for a record 14th time after a grueling 2 weeks in Saudi Arabia. The victory marked his 8th win in the car category. The 55-year-old first won the endurance event on a motorcycle in 1991 and switched to cars after 5 more wins on 2 wheels. Qatari Nasser Al Attiyah came second, with Spain's Carlos Sainz rounding out the podium at third. In the motorcycle category, Argentine Kevin became the first South American to win the title. Friday's race was clouded by the news of the death of French rider Pierre Turpin, who had suffered a crash in the 7th stage. New Zealand side Auckland City have withdrawn from next month's Club World Cup due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Originally scheduled for December, the tournament will start from February in Qatar. Auckland City were scheduled to play Qatari side Al Duhail, who will now enter the competition in the second round. The tournament features global winners of the Continental Club competitions, with Bayern Munich representing UEFA. The draw to finalize the pairings will be held on Tuesday in Zurich. In football, former England international Wayne Rooney has called time on his playing career after being named as manager of Derby County. He had been managing the club on an interim basis while continuing to play, but after retiring officially as a player, he will focus on his role as the manager of the championship side. Rooney has overseen 9 games so far for the club, winning 3 and drawing 4. Leon takes up the role of assistant manager, with former England boss Steve McLaren continuing as technical director. The Rams are third from bottom in the championship level on points with Sheffield Wednesday. Now it's time to have a look at the weather update across the globe. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.